How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Wednesday. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house with us as we finish volume 1, the way the Koran is divided, volume 1 of Tractate Bava Kamma, the 21st volume of the Talmud. Our daf tonight is page 62. Lucy in Minnesota, Tom in PA, Bella in Florida, and I'm so glad you're here. Paul in the great Northwest, Shandora in the Bronx, Bill in mid-Missouri. Where'd it go? Mark in Maryland, Melissa in Great Neck, Sharon in New Jersey, Joe in the Inland Empire, Paula in Chicago, James in Indianapolis, Jonathan in East Ventura County, Ella's in the house, Marjorie in Virginia, Aoife in Florida, Spencer in Connecticut, Marie in Freeport, right? Usually in Freeport. And our sponsor tonight is Bella. So Bella is sponsoring our class in loving memory of my mother, Nina Goldman, whose birthday was on December 29th. For us, her kids, the New Year celebration always started on that day. Bella, may your mom's memory always be for a blessing. May her neshama have a great aliyah in the world of souls. We say amen. May you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. We say amen, and thank you for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. That was on 1-3. Okay. Let's do this. We pick it up a few paragraphs from the top on page 62. And with this, we're going to complete our discussion of Mishna number 7 here in chapter 6. Where we've been talking about one whose fire ends up kindling a stack of grain, and what if there were objects, vessels concealed inside the stack? One of the parameters of this was, is it something we would expect to find concealed in the stack or not? The majority say no. If your negligence led to you having to be liable for the damage that you did to a stack of standing grain, you pay for that. But you're not liable for the items concealed inside. The minority opinion, Rabbi Yehuda, says, no, you're liable even for that. But all seem to agree that if you started the fire on somebody else's property, not just that it's spread from your property there, but if you kindle the fire on somebody else's property, then your liability goes up for sure. That you're going to have to pay is almost certain. However, it's not necessarily going to be the same for all objects. It seems that the rabbis limited that liability for concealed objects, not to everything, but just to what one could expect to find concealed in the stack. Okay, so we pick it up with Rav said, I heard a halachic matter, a matter of Jewish law, in connection with Rabbi Yehuda, the minority opinion that you are liable for items concealed in the stack. I heard a halachic matter in connection with Rabbi Yehuda's opinion in the Mishna, but I do not know what it is. And Shmuel said to Rav, and does Abba, which was Rav's name, does Abba what he heard? This is the statement that he heard. According to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who deems one liable for concealed articles damaged by a fire, the sages applied the ordinance of the robbery victim to one whose concealed items are damaged by his fire. Just as the sages instituted an ordinance that a robbery victim can take an oath as to what was stolen from him, and the robber must repay him accordingly. Similarly, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the owner of the stack can take an oath that certain items were inside the stack, and the one responsible for the fire must pay compensation for them. Right. So this is in the absence of evidence that what was in that stack, that you have evidence of what was in the stack. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, the victim, right, the injured party whose stack was burned along with the items inside, he's not going to just say what was in there. He's going to have to take an oath that what he's saying was in there was actually in there. And so hopefully we're talking about a society where people are honest, God-fearing people who wouldn't lie and take an oath. They would take that seriously, and that's why having the plaintiff swear that oath is a very meaningful matter in terms of evidentiary law. So Amemar asks, did they apply this ordinance of a robbery victim in the case of an informer who causes another person's property to be confiscated by the Gentile authorities or not? And the question is clarified. According to the opinion of the one who says that we do not judge cases of liability for damage that are caused by indirect action, do not ask the question, as according to that opinion, we also do not judge cases of liability for informers who cause indirect damage. So rather, when you ask this question, ask it in accordance with the opinion of the one who said that we do judge cases of liability for damage caused by indirect action. And the question is, did the sages apply the ordinance of a robbery victim to one whose items were taken due to an informer, meaning that the victim can take an oath to support his claim with regard to what was taken and take this amount in compensation or not? And no conclusion was reached about this, and the dilemma shall stand unresolved. But it's a very interesting case, right? Think about it, that if you start a fire, right, and the fire ends up taking hold on the neighbor's property and destroys his house, right? So as we've seen, items within a house are not considered concealed because it's normal for people to keep their stuff in the house. What was in the house? If he's claiming very valuable items, they might make him take an oath about that. But you can create the same kind of loss for a person, in a time of persecution by alerting the authorities and lying and saying, or telling the truth, but being an informer and saying that, your neighbor is somehow, making seditious activity against the government. And then that government will come in and seize all that person's stuff. And so you created the same loss for him as if you had started a fire that burned his house down. So are we going to treat it the same way? Are we going to say that the ordinance of one who is robbed, that he can take an oath and claim what the items were that were robbed, even if the robber, got rid of them and doesn't have them anymore, so that he can get compensated for that, and we extend it to somebody whose house was burned down, or had stuff in a stack of grain that was concealed? And now are we also going to extend that same principle to one who lost his possessions in his house because an informer ratted him out to the authorities, or even told a lie to the authorities, and he now has to compensate? But to what degree does he have to compensate? How many items can the one who had the loss claim the informer cost him? And the issue was left unresolved. Because it was left unresolved, the interesting outcome of that is that if the victim goes and seizes property of the informer in order to compensate himself for the losses that the informer cost him, the rabbinic court won't go in and tell him to return what he seized from the informer. On the other hand, the court won't seize from the informer if the guy tries to do it in court. So it's almost, creates a little bit of incentive for vigilantism. Hopefully these kinds of situations don't come up too often. An incident was related about a certain man who kicked a safe belonging to another, sending it flying into the river. And so we're talking about 1,500 to 2,000 years ago. And right away you're like, a safe? That seems so modern, right? Like a metal box with a combination lock. Did they really have that back then? And the answer is, I don't know if they had, the kind of rotary number dial to open the safe. I don't know how complicated the locking mechanism was, but did they have a metal box that they kept valuables in? Yeah, they had that. So, an incident was related about a certain man who kicked a safe belonging to another person and sent it flying into the river. So the owner of the safe came to court and said, I had such and such valuables inside the safe. And Rav Ashi sat and was investigating the question. In a case like this, what is the law? Does the court believe the claimant or not? Because, theoretically, now that his safe has been kicked in the river, and he's going to take the one who kicked it to court, no, he could say anything, right? He could say, well, I had $10 in there, or I had $1,000 in there. I had a silver necklace, or I had a platinum and diamond necklace. Do we believe him? He is the victim of somebody, who trashed his property by throwing it in the river. But to what extent are we going to believe him? That's the problem. So Ravina said to Rav Acha, the son of Rava, and some say that Rav Acha, the son of Rava, said to Rav Ashi, is this not identical to the case of the Mishna? As we learned in the Mishna, and the rabbis concede to Rabbi Yehuda that if one sets fire to a building, he pays compensation for everything that was burned inside it. Why? Because it is normal for people to place their items inside their house. Similarly, it is the normal way of people to place money in a safe, and the court should rely on the claim of the victim. Rav Ashi said to him, if the claimant were to claim that there were coins in the safe, this ruling would apply here also. But with what are we dealing? We are dealing with a case where the claimant claims that there was a pearl, marganita, in the safe. So then what is the law? Do people typically place pearls in a safe? In which case he should be believed or not? And the answer was, the dilemma shall stand unresolved. So they didn't issue a precedent that would be binding on future courts. They probably litigated that case and asked the claimant to say, can you bring any evidence? Can you bring a witness of who sold you that pearl and when? Has anyone seen it? He would have needed to provide further evidence of this very valuable pearl that was in his safe, presumably before he would be believed. And that the one who kicked it would have to reimburse him for it. Rav Yemar said to Rav Ashi, if the one whose home was burned by the fire were to claim that he had, among other items, a silver goblet in the building, what is the law? Is he believed or not? And Rav Ashi said to him, well, we view his situation. If he is a wealthy person who would typically have a silver goblet, or alternatively, if he is a trustworthy person with whom people entrust valuable items, so then he can take an oath that this is what he had and take compensation according to his claim. But if he is not such a person, it is not in his power to be believed in such a claim. Now, I don't think what they're saying is, so rich people get reimbursed because they typically have items, and poor people don't get reimbursed because they typically don't. Even though, of course, it's possible that a poor person had a valuable item in his house. I think what they're really saying is further evidence is required than just the claim of the claimant. Now, new subject. Rav Ada, the son of Rav Avia, said to Rav Ashi, concerning two terms used to describe those who take another person's property against his will, namely a gazlan and a chamsan. What is the difference between them? So Rav Ashi said to him, a chamsan gives money for the article that he takes from its owner, even though it's against the owner's will, whereas a gazlan does not give money. Right? In other words, it's remember the Godfather, he told the what was it? He told the band leader that he's going to make him an offer he can't refuse. Either he's going to sign the contract with his hand or with his brains, right? Something like that. So that's the difference here. One person, they're both criminals, but one is forcing the other one to sell against his will and then pays him, and the other one is just a plain out-and-out robber. So Rav Ada was puzzled by this response and said to him, if he gives money, do you still call him a chamsan? Since he pays money for it, he acquires it lawfully despite the fact that its owner did not sell it voluntarily. But doesn't Rav Huna say if one was strung up so that another could coerce him to sell a certain item and he sold it, his sale is a valid sale? And this indicates that a sale under duress is considered a valid sale. And Rav Ashi answered, this is not difficult. This case where the sale under duress is legally considered to be a sale, this is referring to a case where the person eventually said, okay, I want to sell the item despite having been forced. By contrast, in that case where the sale is invalid, he never changed his mind and said, okay, I want to sell. It was always against his will, and therefore it is not a valid sale. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 7. Here's the final Mishnah in chapter 6, Mishnah number 8. Now we're at the top of page 62b. In the case of a spark that emerged from under the hammer of a blacksmith and started a fire, causing damage, the blacksmith is liable for the damage caused. In other words, this happened just he's routinely doing his work as a blacksmith, but a spark got away from his anvil, and obviously there was something nearby that shouldn't have been near his anvil creating sparks, and a fire caught. So even though he wasn't intending to kindle a fire, there was some kind of negligence, and that's why he's liable. Now, the second part of this Mishnah, we've encountered this teaching quite a few times. In the case of a camel that was laden with flax and was passing through the public domain, so imagine stalks of flax extending well beyond the sides of the camel, was laden with flax and was passing through the public domain, and its flax extended into a store. And the flax caught fire from a lamp that was in the store belonging to the storekeeper. And as a result of the burning flax, the camel set fire to the building together with all its contents. The owner of the camel is liable. Who created the fire? The storekeeper. But where did the storekeeper create the fire? Inside his store. He had no reason to believe that his fire would escape his store. Who created the problem? The camel, the guy who owned the camel, that was overburdened with flax that extended well beyond the side of the camel and extended into the stall, right, of the storekeeper, and that's how it caught fire, and then it kept going and burned other things, right? It was the camel driver who was not careful enough to keep the flax out of the stall and away from a fire. But if the storekeeper placed his lamp outside, now he's the one who created the hazard, thereby causing the flax on the camel to catch fire, and consequently the building was set on fire, then the storekeeper is liable. Rabbi Yehuda says, in a case where the lamp was placed outside as a Hanukkah lamp, then the storekeeper is exempt, since it is a mitzvah for a Hanukkah lamp to be placed outside. That's Mishnah number 8. Here's the Gemara. Ravina said in the name of Rava, conclude from Rabbi Yehuda's statement that the mitzvah is to place the Chanukah lamp within a height of 10 handbreadths from the ground, as if it enters your mind to say that the mitzvah can also be fulfilled by placing it above 10 handbreadths, why did Rabbi Yehuda say that in the case of a Hanukkah lamp placed outside, the storekeeper is exempt? Let the owner of the camel say to the storekeeper, you should have placed the lamp above the height of a camel and its rider, so that the flax would not catch fire. Rather, must one not conclude from here that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that the mitzvah is to place it within 10 handbreadths of the ground and not higher, which is quite typical when people place Hanukkah lights outside, which is still done in Israel. They're not high up, right? They're usually within 40 inches of the ground. And the sages say in response, well, no, there is no proof from here. Actually, I could say to you that one may place a Hanukkah lamp even above a height of 10 handbreadths. And as for what you said that the owner of the camel can claim, you should have placed the lamp above the height of the camel and its rider. In response, one can say, since the store owner is performing a mitzvah by placing his Hanukkah lamp outside, the sages did not trouble him to such an extent to have him place his lamp at a height that would be inconvenient for him to reach. Further, on the subject of the height of a Hanukkah lamp, Rav Kahana says that Rav Nassan bar Minyumi taught in the name of Rabbi Tanchum, a Hanukkah lamp that is placed higher than 20 cubits from the ground, that's high, that's 30 feet up in the air, like 3 stories, is unfit to be used for the mitzvah, since people do not generally look up to such a height. And the main purpose of the Hanukkah lamp is for it to be seen by others. In this regard, the law of the height of a Hanukkah lamp is like the law of the height of a sukkah, and the halacha of the height of a crossbeam at the entrance to an alleyway, which would make it so in order to allow you to carry on Shabbos. And these items are unfit for their respective purposes if they are higher than 20 cubits. Again, a sukkah, the schach, right, the roofing material is what really makes it a sukkah. But if that's more than 20 cubits above the ground, it's kind of out of view and people don't really appreciate that they're in a sukkah. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 8, and it concludes chapter 6, and it concludes volume 1 of Tractate Bava Kamma, as Koren Publishers divide it. Art Scroll divides it into volumes a little bit differently. But let's go to volume 2. Now we're opening chapter 7 on page 62b with Mishnah number 1. The principle of double payment applies more broadly than the principle of fourfold or fivefold payment, as the principle of double payment applies both to the theft of something that is alive and to the theft of something that is not alive. But the principle of fourfold or fivefold payment applies only to the theft of an ox or a sheep. As it is stated, if a man steal an ox or a sheep and slaughter it or sell it, he shall pay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. That's Exodus 21:37. So now, we've been talking about damages for goring, damages for eating and trampling, damages for a pit, damages for fire, and damages where a person hurts another person with his direct force. Now, we're still talking about payment damages that might accrue that one person has to pay another, but what created the liability is different. Now we're talking about theft, and the basic the basic standard case is if you steal something and you don't return it of your own volition, but rather witnesses come and say you stole, and you're caught, right, and you have to make restitution. You don't return only what you stole, you have to return what you stole plus that value again. That's the twofold payment. And if you stole an ox and sell it and sell it after you stole it, or slaughter it after you stole it, then the person you stole the ox from, you're going to owe him 5 oxen. Very heavy penalty. And with sheep, same idea, but 4 sheep per sheep that you stole. Having stated a limitation to the law of fourfold and fivefold payment, the Mishnah mentions a further limitation, which applies to all 3 types of payments. One who steals an item after a thief has already stolen it, i.e., one who steals from a thief, one who steals a stolen item. He does not pay a double payment to the thief, nor to the prior owner, nor does one who slaughters or sells an ox or a sheep after a thief has already stolen it pay the fourfold or fivefold payment. Rather, he pays only the principal, i.e., the value of the item that he stole. I've got my portable heater on, but it's quite hot enough. Okay, the Gemara on Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 7. The Mishnah teaches one particular difference between double payment and the fourfold or fivefold payment, while it does not teach this difference between them. The principle of double payment applies both in the case of a thief and in the case of a bailee who falsely states the claim that a thief stole the deposit that was entrusted to him and who takes an oath to that effect. But the principle of fourfold or fivefold payment applies only in the case of a thief and not in the case of one who falsely claims that the animal entrusted to him was stolen. Now, the fact that the Mishnah does not teach this latter distinction supports the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda bar Abba. As Rabbi Yehuda bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says, in the case of one who falsely states the claim that a thief stole a deposit from him, and it is discovered that he himself is the thief, he pays double payment. And if the stolen item is an ox or a sheep, and he slaughtered it or sold it, he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment. So according to Rabbi Yehuda bar Abba, there is no difference between the applications of double payment and fourfold or fivefold payment in this case. And there are those who say a different version of this discussion. Let us say that the Mishnah supports the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda bar Abba. As Rabbi Yehuda bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says, in the case of one who falsely states the claim that a thief stole a deposit from him, and it is discovered that he himself is the thief, he pays double payment. And if the stolen item is an ox or a sheep and he slaughtered or sold it, he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment. So the Gemara rejects the inference. Does the Mishnah teach that there is no difference between double payment and fourfold or fivefold payment, except for the one mentioned in the Mishnah? It teaches merely that the principle of double payment applies more broadly than the principle of fourfold or fivefold payment, and it provides an example of this statement. This does not mean that this is the only difference, and it is possible that the Tana of our Mishnah taught this one case but omitted the others. Right? Just because a case is stated, there's no reason to assume that that is the only case. Now, the Mishnah teaches that the principle of double payment applies both to the theft of, by the way, we have a short class today. I'm actually approaching the end. So if you've got questions or comments, make sure you get them in. Right, so the Mishnah teaches that the principle of double payment applies both to the theft of something that is alive and to the theft of something that is not alive. So the Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? It is, as the sages taught in a Baraisa with regard to the verse that discusses double payment, for any matter of trespass, whether it be for an ox, for a donkey, for a sheep, for a garment, or for any manner of lost thing about which one shall say, this is it, the claims of both of them shall come before the judges. The one whom the judges convict shall pay double to his neighbor. This is Exodus 22:8. Now, for any matter of trespass, this is a generalization. Whether it be for an ox, for a donkey, for a sheep, for a garment, this is a detail. And when the verse states, or for any manner of lost thing, it then generalizes again. So where we have generalization, detail, and generalization, we have an exegetic principle, right? Exegesis principle that we can learn from. So consequently, this verse contains a generalization, a detail, and a generalization. And one of the 13 rules of exegesis states that in such a case, you may deduce that the verse is referring only to items that are similar to the detail. Therefore, just as each of the items mentioned in the detail is clearly defined as an item that is movable property and has intrinsic monetary value, so too, double payment is practiced with regard to any item that is movable property and has intrinsic monetary value, to the exclusion of land, because land is not movable property. Canaanite slaves are excluded because they are compared to land in many areas of Jewish law. Financial documents are excluded as, although they are movable property, they do not have intrinsic monetary value. They represent something valuable. Financial documents represent a loan, a credit, ownership of land, something like that. But the paper themselves has no real value. The value of the material on which the document is written is negligible. Documents are valuable only because they serve as proof for monetary claims. Finally, so in other words, if you steal somebody's title to the land, like you just stole the actual title, right? And then, that person gets caught and they have to return it. They're not going to have to return double the value of the land represented by the title. The land itself, did the guy who took the title then go and build something on the land and act like it was his? That would be a different case. But generally, this twofold payment doesn't apply to something that doesn't have intrinsic monetary value itself. And finally, consecrated property is also excluded because it is written in the verse that the one found liable shall pay double to whom? To his neighbor. This is another person, and that is to the exclusion of property that was consecrated because that is owned by the Holy Temple and not by an individual person. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. Nina is still away, so let me see if I can scan the comments and identify questions that I can answer. Let's see. Sharon says, Sai the Talmud cat is making it so hard to comment, insisting on being between me and the keyboard. Talmud is Zionist propaganda. Right, so you're going to be blocked and removed from this discussion. Thank you very much. Bill, it's talking about safes that we were talking about before, that rotary number dials are a relatively new thing. But clockwork locks have been around for over 500 years, and you'd be shocked how complex the locks could be 15 centuries ago. Interesting. Any safe cracker today could sneeze them open, but give a human a valuable object and they will find a metal box to keep it safe in. Very good. Can I just block this person now? Yes, I can. Okay. Bye-bye. Okay. Naturally, we get them with Nina being gone and unable to wield the might of the banhammer. Jonathan, with regard to informers, Shmuel gets a knock on the door, and Russian police... Oh, I think I know this joke. This is a good one. Yeah. So Shmuel gets a knock on the door, and the Russian police say, "We have been told you have diamonds hidden in your woodpile. Stay here while we look." After 30 minutes, all the wood has been turned to kindling, and no diamonds were found. Shmuel calls his neighbor, Shlomo. They left. Shlomo says, "Great, now it's my turn. Tell them I have gold in the vegetable garden. The garden needs the soil turned." Very good, Jonathan. You guys are discussing the troll. Very good. Okay, I guess that's what we got. And let me just check over there on the YouTube side. Nothing. Okay, so that's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Thursday, at the regular Thursday time of 6 p.m. Pacific. Just giving you guys a heads up that on Sunday, we won't have a class. I have to travel a little bit to attend a Chabad fundraiser in Palm Springs, so I'm going to be over there. But that's on Sunday, and I'll give you plenty of notice about that. Have a great night, and look forward to seeing you all, God willing, tomorrow, Thursday. Bye-bye.